of this web forum. The session is on new productions and the company. The speakers are myself, Luciano Pilotti, Dimitri Korpakis, Sandrine Laborie, and Marco Belandi. The session is tightly related to the previous session, and so I will first start with my presentation. The needs of the citizens as the drivers of the new European strategy. I just show these slides which indicate how possibly the pandemic and the economic situation will evolve. We are already overcome this phase. We are in this phase, but we are highly uncertain on what will occur in the second half of the 2020. And certainly we are now discussing in our web forum how to promote this last phase, which maybe will occur at the end of 2020 or in 2021. And so we have to think in a long-term perspective. So go back to my presentation. This web forum is organized by the group Growth, Investment and Territory during the COVID-19 crisis, and aims to promote a wide consensus between many international experts on the industrial and regional policy measures to be adopted by the European Union and the national and regional governments in order to promote an economic recovery and a better environment in a medium-long-term perspective. The lockdown has decreased the consumer demand, especially in service activities, such as trade, tourism, entertainment, culture, education, health, and professional services, which represent more than 70% of the jobs in the euro area. In fact, services have been most affected by social distancing measures, since they require a tight interaction between the producers and the users of the various services. Moreover, population and services are concentrated in cities, and the spatial agglomeration of people has facilitated the spread of coronavirus in the most densely populated regions. In my presentation, I would like to answer to some crucial questions of the policy strategy to be adopted. First question, why? As there is a need to overcome the limitation of the supply side oriented approach adopted by the neoliberal and ordoliberal policies which have characterized the last decade after the 2007-2008 financial crisis. Second question, what? As European, national, and local institutions should first of all decide the specific productions and technologies to be promoted and the specific programs and the investment projects which are needed for operative actions, and not only the size of the European recovery plan and the specific institutional regulation of that plan. Third question, where? As it is most necessary to regulate the economic relations both at the international scale and within the specific regional areas, taking into account both the reshoring process occurring in a global international perspective and the increase of the interregional and intra-regional disparities. Fourth question, who as the production by private company should respond to the need by the consumers, the local citizen, and the other stakeholders, while the state should orient the long-term strategies of private companies. And the various papers emphasize the increasing role of the state, especially Luciano Pilotti will speak on that. In synthesis, the causes of the current stagnation of the European economy are the insufficient domestic demand or private or public consumption and investment, and the too large surplus of the current balance with foreign countries of the European Union, and especially in the macroeconomic session, there will be a discussion on that, determined by a large surplus of internal saving on internal investment in the private sector, and in some countries also, like Germany, also in the public sector. And this is leading to the accumulation of excess financial assets, and then to the danger of speculative movement for global financial instability. Second, causes of the current stagnation is the lack of an European industrial strategy in the medium term, which could promote larger public investment and lead to the investment of private companies toward a new strategic production for greater growth and environmental quality by using the large existing liquid funds. The aims of a new European industrial strategy is broader than the sectoral goals of the traditional industrial policy. And a new European industrial strategy should not only aim to economic growth, but also to respond to the new needs for a better well-being of the European citizen and a sustainable environment in the various regions and countries in Europe. In particular, a new industrial strategy should aim on the supply side to create a new innovative production that diversify the European production system, but also on the demand side to stimulate consumer demand for new industrial production and innovative services. That implies that a new industrial strategy should not only expand the supply capacity of companies by reducing cost and increasing productivity, but it should also stimulate the consumer demand for new products and services that create new markets and can drive the investment effort of the company, thus diversifying the European and national production system. Therefore, in a post-COVID crisis, the demand becomes the main driver of the economy. It may be useful to distinguish three categories of instruments of a new European industrial strategy according to their respective time perspective. Therefore, in a long-term perspective, industrial policy must regulate mergers and acquisition and promote nationalization or privatization or public-private partnership, and Pilotti, but also Labori and Bianchi will speak about that. The objective should be the development of modern production in Europe and the creation of new jobs, and not to support with public money financial operation leading only to short-term profits. Monetary policy and banks should not provide only credit, as in a traditional industrial economy, where the growth proceeds in an incremental pattern, but especially equity capital. In fact, innovation typically implies a high level of risk, and bank loans and also corporate bonds may only have a complementary role with respect to equity capital. Moreover, national and regional industrial policy should promote the mergers and diversification and the long-term expansion of the local SMEs and avoid their acquisition by the more diversified, larger corporation, leading to the disruption of the national and European supply chain. Concerning the medium-term perspective, the National Ministry of Industry and the European Commission could immediately define 6 to 10 major strategic projects in the new lead markets connected with emerging needs of the European citizen, such as those which are indicated in this slide, on which the previous speaker have made reference. This modern production, sorry.
We don't see any slide.
Excuse?
The slide.
Oh, santo pace.
Non ci hai fatto vedere nulla, Riccardo.
Potevate dirmelo prima, caro.
No, se non te lo dicevo io, non te lo diceva nessuno, questo per quanto sono attenti.
Sì. Allora, you can see the slides. Anyhow, the slides are not so important because they just repeat what I said. So concerning the medium-term perspective, the National Ministry of Industry should focus on these different sectors on which also previous speakers have made reference. These modern productions are demand-oriented or driven by the internal demand and not by export. They are especially concentrated in urban areas where the negative health and economic impact of COVID-19 has been more severe. They are also capable to respond to the new modern needs of the citizen. As indicated in this figure, a new modern industrial strategy having a territorial dimension must take into account the interaction between 4 types of actors within a modern industrial system: the companies, the worker, the community of citizens who are also consumers and savers, the territory, the city network, and the natural environment. Finally, considering a short-term perspective, a third field of intervention of the European industrial strategy concerns measures aiming to increase the sales, strengthen the financial structure, and decrease taxes in specific strategic sectors. A better integration is needed between industrial policy and financial and fiscal policy. In fact, the key problem is the decrease of the investment propensity by the companies. The existing tax codes allow too high fiscal incentives when investing in finance. Thus, fiscal incentives should be oriented to promote capital expenditure, innovation, and job creation, while the actual loopholes in the fiscal codes lead to tax avoidance and favor financial speculation by large companies. Moreover, a tighter integration between traditional industrial policies and labor policies is needed, as indicated by Labori, Bianchi, and Pilotti, and innovation requires a larger public and private immaterial investments in labor education and research and development. Fiscal policy should be used not only in order to decrease the cost of the company in crisis, but it can also be used in a proactive way in order to promote the growth of the new production. Therefore, a lower value-added tax rate can be introduced on those products and services which may represent a social or private advantage, for the well-being of the citizen. Finally, fiscal and financial policies should facilitate companies in participating to joint projects aiming to create a large local and regional infrastructure and new production together with complementary SMEs belonging to the same production chain, rather than finance large investment in individual companies, especially large multinational, but also in the zombie company. In conclusion, the recent experience of the lockdown during the COVID crisis has indicated that the sense of solidarity and the political participation of the citizens is stronger at the local and the regional level, while the national closure is advocated by political ideologies such as populism, sovereignism, nationalism, separatism, which are stronger at the national level. Moreover, all local communities of citizens in Europe share very similar problems. So cooperation at the European level is possible. Therefore, the development of common institutions and the sense of a common European belonging depends on an increasing decentralization of investment decision to the lowest possible level. The European institution should enhance the creation of those common goods at the European level, which could be an advantage for all European citizens. Examples of common goods at the European scale are health, education, culture, knowledge, innovation, environment, free time, decrease of income and social disparities, greater participation in decision-making, and a common economic and political role vis-à-vis the rest of the world. Therefore, a new European industrial strategy that promotes growth and a better quality of life in the different areas of the European Union certainly represents an European added value with respect to the limit of the current European and national monetary and fiscal policies. I thank you for your attention. So, I will give now the word to the next speaker, Luciano Pilotti. Please, Luciano, you can start.
Thank you, Riccardo. Good morning. Here, do you hear me and see me? I'm sorry, I'm not slide. I hope to simplify my conversation this morning. My talk today is on crisis and resilience in post-COVID-19, from distrust to new multi-local supercycle and relational state for European Green New Deal. First of all, we can debate about the nature of industrial strategy. If we want to overcome the pandemic crisis, will be necessary to transform it in an opportunity. Yes, I know, simple but not easy. We need to push the double transition in green and digital worlds, and to support evolution of our companies in networks of networks, along supply chains and platforms increasingly integrated to a multi-regional and international level, acting with macro region possibly, because I think that our traditional regional approach has failure after COVID-19. We therefore need to start an industrial strategy that puts the transformation of the multi-local production system with a sort of reindustrialization as in the 30s for electricity, but with high level of participation and inclusion, improving both quality of human capital and quality of territorial community. What about the territorial industrial policy? I think that is absolutely necessary, producing, planning, and consuming differently with appropriate local endogenous industrial policy with a high level of integration, well welded with macroeconomic policy by acting on exogenous factors transformed in endogenous ones. For example, around the integration between technological and green innovation with quality of education in labor market, in close connection with European resource and project emerging. COVID-19 seemed to me has removed exogenous factors, definitely. Third point is the role of relational state and the nature of state we need after COVID-19. A critical phase of exit from the COVID crisis will require the transitional strengthening of the state presence through appropriate investment in equity and push CSR corporate culture, for example, to foster the great convergence between strategic activities considered essential for the future and that are accompanied by the activating Europe as a whole. With a relational state that can be reduced as a simple controller or simple coordinator, but a state that stimulates markets, organization, and institution in a quadruple helix approach. For example, as said before, to reform themselves by co-creating shared value and innovation for an emerging economic, social, and environmental resilience by pairing green and digital transformation, able to reduce inequality from different digital world and from different regions, coupling with cooperation and competition by private and public alliances. A relational state is a state where citizens are active subjects able to decide bottom up on different items and topics about the life, health, education, safeness, public resources, and so on, and not only a subject with needs demanding monetary answer as in a traditional welfare state. In Italy, after the crisis of regional power in the governance of pandemic, it will be necessary a transition to a different multi-regional governance of multi-level process, industry, health, education, bioeconomy, tourism, public administration as macro-region approach. Probably is a provocation 4 or 5 macro-region in Italy, the question green transition, despite COVID-19, and indeed even more precisely for this pandemic and its nature, the Green New Deal transition remains the cornerstone of the European policy of the next 30 and 50 years through the leverage of economic sustainability as much as product and services, as well as way of producing and consuming able to preserving environment, territories, and community. What about the operational tools to realize these trajectories? First of all, using golden power to defend our national public company, and not only from any external threats that would affect in its control with time limits. Secondarily, offering directionality and promotion to the coordination of investment and production chain defined as strategic, about the manufacturing and services, but also seeing to the landscape of our territories. Thirdly, outlining long-term planning tools, avoiding dispersion of action and intervention of different local regional levels, especially in the energy, infrastructure, health services, and education training fields. Fourth, introducing conditionality related to green and environmental infrastructure innovation policy in a systemic key cross with the 2 pillars, circular sustainability and digital economy. Fifth, development of an infrastructure network for health protection, looking at the resurgence of future health crises and the emergence of new ones with a multi-regional and international coordination. Sixth, incentivizing the acceleration conversion of entire continental Green New Deal in industries, labor market, and education plans. 7th, a widespread investment in school and research to overcome educational and class inequalities in access to knowledge toward a society of equals, to be stronger and faster in adapting to external shocks, to increase the widespread embezzlement of innovation, and to restore the resumption of competitiveness in the country, especially in cognitive productivity that allows wage to rise even for greater dynamic stability of the labor market. 8th, reforming public administration with the know-how to operate by project and promotes merit, intelligent bureaucracies, aligning with the European trajectory in digital and green world project. Which type of Europe we need? We are condemned to be interdependent because environmental sustainability, migration and refugee flows, and financial instability are parts of a deep global imbalance, and that require global responses with more multilateral cooperation and not less. Also reforming great global institutions, United Nations, IMF, and so on. In conclusion, we can say about, we can see which type of globalization. But see to globalization, we need to recover the trust of people all over the world, disappointed by the effects of an asymmetric and unequal globalization that had to solve of all our ills, reducing inequalities, relative poverty, threats of global warming, that politics in the last 20 years have not adequately responded. Macroeconomic policy, given that we will get more indebted from this crisis and that we will be exposed for decades to the risk of financing, we'll have to become more efficient and lighter, even relying on refinancing rates below our potential growth rate, rebuilding better trading capacity in Europe and making the best use of the tools it offers us with long-term loans and secured by the EU umbrella, as we have tried to do even in the COVID-19 crisis, gaining the time which is so scarce. Acting on the one hand, private saving, and on the other, the primary surplus that has been gradually improving since 1992. What about saving? We must therefore ensure that enormous private savings are gradually...
Look to the screen, Luciano. Luciano, your camera, yes.
Okay. About savings, and our enormous private savings are gradually geared towards productive investment, even with less use of home ownership, where possible and useful as fueling a recovery in investment and growth that will then allow that to be normalized. That's why it's necessary to inject confidence, preventing the legacy of the pandemic crisis from being increased risk aversion as a preference for inactive savings due to uncertainty on future returns. Further, slowing the recovery in productivity that has been declining, unfortunately, for more than 25 years. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Luciano. Thank you very much. I don't know whether you had some slides or did you intentionally didn't want to use the slides. Yes, anyhow, if you have slides,
no time for slides tomorrow.
If you have slides, we will diffuse them in to the participant of the forum. So the next speaker is Dimitri Korpakis. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thanks to everybody. Let me share my screen. I will put it. So I will give this presentation on behalf of our group, which we call Friends of Smart Specialization. We're a small group of independent experts in Brussels. I myself, I'm a retired European Commission official, but I do not represent the Commission by giving this presentation. So this is a big disclaimer. And Richard Tufts is among the participants, so he may intervene later in the discussion if there is a debate. So our presentation is focused on post-COVID-19 recovery policies, a call for aligned, place-based and sustainable development strategies in the EU. So when the crisis hit in February, as you remember, there was a huge mobilization in the European Union, and after some difficult moments, there was a European Council on the 26th of March, where the member states mandated the Commission to come up with a big new plan for recovery that will look exactly to how we can go out in an orderly exit of the crisis with a comprehensive recovery plan, with unprecedented investment, as they have called on, and focus on the green and the digital transitions. Incidentally, a few months earlier, actually in December, the Commission had presented their new growth strategy, the European Green Deal, which you can visualize as the new Lisbon strategy, if you were familiar with the previous Lisbon strategy. And then a few days before the crisis hit Belgium in March, the Commission had presented also the new European industrial strategy, for which I will be talking. So the COVID-19 was a wake-up call because it proved that we need to make our way of life in our economy much more resilient. We were very, very fragile to external shocks. In fact, COVID-19 is a natural disaster that many experts had, as you know, had written that it was actually something that we could foresee. And many people have foreseen that, but as it happens, they were dismissed as alarmists. So indeed, the Union came up with an unprecedented investment effort that you know it's called Next Generation EU. And it is unprecedented because for the first time, the Union has accepted to go out of the the markets and borrow money on behalf of the Union, which has never happened before. Now, as you know, all this is still on the table because there is no decision yet. The decision may come maybe next week when there will be the new European Council on the 17th and the 18th of July. But as we have a lot of texts and promises on the table that goes on huge amounts of money, we know the what, but we still do not focus sufficiently on the how. That means the way that the recovery strategy will be implemented. So we argue that the Green Deal and the industrial strategy must develop a multi-level governance model that engages cities and regions across Europe with at policy level closest to both citizens and innovation ecosystems that are really there to solve citizens' needs. So it is indeed a Europe's defining moment. We never had such an array of financial instruments before our eyes. The new industrial strategy implementing the twin transitions, green and digital, that most of you have spoken this morning. And we have a particular set of measures, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, with a lot of financial mechanisms from the EU, including a new approach on cohesion policy, because I understand many of you are concerned with cohesion policy, but not only. So it spans in many areas, including a new funds for research and innovation, and also for industrial strategy. But the real key question for us is how to connect local investment decisions for innovation and systemic transformation with top-down Europe-wide priorities. We have the top-down, but we still miss the regional dimension. So if you go through these documents, which are very well elaborated, you will find anything but the regional dimension. Only in the communication on the industrial strategy, there is a brief reference to industrial ecosystems, which is not the same thing as our regional innovation ecosystems. So we argue that we can use smart specialization strategies that is still around, that can make the difference, and to go for a new prioritization of resources for innovation and transformation for the European recovery. So we believe that this new Marshall Plan for Europe can really use smart specialization as a real new part of European governance that will lead us to joint investments that will mitigate the top-down strategy with the bottom-up. And at the moment, everything you see is much more on the fiscal side, but we really need much more place-based policies to make this all real, because we have seen this before. You have a lot of promises at the European level, but you cannot see exactly how this will connect with the local and regional level. So as you remember, smart specialization has a lot of advantages. We go for a competitive positioning for the economy of the future. We need to go for smart complementarities between European territories to align resources and to go for tailored policy mixes for better policy integration. And only like this we can engage trust from people, from our societies, to build trust in the future. The post-pandemic recovery can really be successful if we update our strategies with an outward-looking approach and mission orientation in line with the new European growth strategy, enrich the present methodologies for interregional partnering through the co-development of joint strategies between leading cluster organizations. This is also something that has been relatively forgotten in the new documents, although there is again some reference to that, and to ensure a better political mandate and commitment for engaging into a new leadership approach. And we believe that with a reinvigorated, resilience-proofed, smart specialization strategies, we can go for the European green and digital transformation. The role of local and regional authorities in this respect is crucial, but they need to improve in their institutional and administrative capacities. They need a new commitment through smart specialization. Otherwise, any kind of attempt for new industrial strategy will remain an empty promise. And many people have stressed the need to build new quadruple helix formations for new entrepreneurial discovery processes with a new democratic legitimacy. And we believe very much that this is the case. And this is something that we should not forget. We should not be inward looking. We should keep our eyes open to connect to global production networks, because as much as we talk about reshoring and deglobalizations, we cannot achieve this overnight. The value chains are there, but still we need to modernize the European value chains in the context of global reorganization of the global supply chains. So we will be happy to take your questions. On the screen, you have also our web pages. You can go on and look our policy papers. We have a rich action until now. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. There is someone who... So the next speaker is Sandrine Laborie.
Hello.
Sandrine?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Wait.
So you have the floor, Sandrine. Yeah, and Sandrine is presenting a paper also with Patrizio Bianchi.
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen first. Share. Allow Zoom. Okay, is it working?
We cannot see the screen.
Okay.
You have to share.
Yeah, I'm trying. Desktop share.
Share the screen button is on down.
The green button.
Yeah, but I have to.
The green button.
Okay, I should. I'm not going to share my screen. I'm sorry, because the computer, Apple computer, asks me to leave the meeting, change my settings, and then back, and then so well. This is so I will start. Okay. So in line, in fact, with what has been said so far in this very interesting meeting, for which I really thank Ricardo to have invited me. We suggest a coherent industrial strategy at all levels of government, regional, national, and European, to help European industry restructure after the COVID crisis, but in line with the previous structural trends. So I'm really following what Dimitri Korpakis has just said. So what we stress is that the COVID crisis has hit the European industries in a period of deep structural changes that already put pressure for them to upgrade or branch into new activities, adopt new technologies, and redefine their business models. The pandemic reinforces these trends, making the need for industrial policy at all levels of governments even stronger. So these two trends are globalization and Industry 4.0, as you know. In fact, industrial policy has been back on the agenda of policymakers and scholars at the beginning of the year 2000 due to globalization, the intensification of competition induced by globalization. Globalization has led to the diffusion of a new form of production organization, namely global value chains, which exploit the most convenient conditions for production and realizes different phases of the production process in different countries accordingly. The global value chain form of organization is not sustainable from both a social and environmental point of view from the beginning. From a social point of view, it essentially exploits poor working conditions in developing countries. So it excludes social inclusiveness, if I can say so. From an environmental point of view, besides the lower environmental standards in countries where some production phases were offshore, the organizational model implies higher use of transport logistics, which contributes to global emissions. The disadvantages of global value chains have been increasingly stressed over the last 10 years. There were quality problems, reduction of employment in countries where firms delocalized production, and loss of industrial commons, that is the shared knowledge base locally when all production is done in the same territory. So reshoring has been a tendency in the last decade, reinforced by the other driver of structural change, which is Industry 4.0. The width and breadth of technological change induced by the fourth industrial revolution is now well documented. A key aspect of this transformation is hyperconnection. All individuals, but also machines and objects constantly collect data, exchange data via sensors and smartphones, computers, and other equipment. A large part of information thus become digitalized, namely transformed into computer readable format, and all business processes can be digitalized, and this is having a big impact on organizations and industries. In this context, institutions also have to adapt in order to favor structural changes in specific directions. We have shown in different articles and books that territories have an increasing role, particularly in providing enabling conditions for the adaptation of their industries coherently with the society. And we have shown extensively the case of the Emilia-Romagna region in Italy, which has implemented such, I could say, comprehensive industrial policy at the regional level, being able also to mobilize higher levels of government for that. Higher levels of government have a role to play, especially in terms of guaranteeing a level playing field, such as big projects like the one stressed by Ricardo, and ensuring fair competition on markets, especially with regards to the emergence of new monopolies, which is typical of industrial revolutions, and in this fourth one, like in the previous ones. So the fourth industrial revolution reinforces the trend towards reshoring. Territories able to pool and develop key resources for the new type of production processes that is emerging will attract firms. So they have to become hubs of knowledge and competencies for that, providing enabling conditions. It is important to stress that even less developed regions have a chance to catch up in the current context. Whereas in previous industrial revolutions, companies could not make jumps. They had to go through the different steps of industrialization. The new technologies allow to make such jumps. In particular, digitalization regards all activities from the most basic and simple to the most sophisticated. For instance, even agriculture is deeply transforming with precision agriculture, the use of robots, etc. So the main enabling conditions that are necessary for this transformation to happen are providing infrastructures, favoring the development of capabilities, skills and knowledge, networking, favoring the relationships within regions, but also outside regions, and also acting on policy coherence, because industrial policy cannot be effective without complementary and coherent social policy, education and training policy, and so on. So the COVID crisis has accelerated the trends induced by globalization and the fourth industrial revolution. Global value chains have been completely disrupted, given the closing of many frontiers in the world. In addition, digitalization has accelerated, confirming that what is happening now is a digital globalization, namely international exchange of data rather than intermediate or final goods. The companies providing digitalization services, from the production of devices to the provision of connection, cloud services and software, are gaining market power, especially the GAFAM, Google, Amazon, Facebook, which are the new monopolies, but not only. And it's quite also worrying in Europe that none of these GAFAM are European, okay? The necessary structural changes can also be orientated towards specific development path, and environmental sustainability is a key choice now. And from this perspective, as already stressed previously this morning, the Green Deal proposed by the European Commission and endorsed by all member states is extremely welcome. Making industrial and more generally development path greener has to start from the bottom, especially in regions which are closer to citizens and entrepreneurs and can make strategic choices towards sustainable path, building narratives in favor of the new orientation, initiating institutional change and convincing stakeholders. Regional stakeholders in government should also look outside the region for this purpose in order to access information and find potential for smart complementarities. Territories must become hubs of relevant knowledge and competencies. It is in this sense that smart specialization is important. However, territories cannot realize this aim on their own. They have to be supported by higher levels of government that provide resources and help them build smart complementarities with other territories. And here I resonate also similar things said by previous speakers like Dimitri. Building smart complementarities in the same country and abroad, especially in Europe, where synergies between countries should be further exploited. The national and European levels should have a complementary role, favoring the interaction and collaboration of regions all over Europe to avoid duplications and favor synergies. Higher levels of government must also deal with the two issues I mentioned previously, big projects like the one stressed by Ricardo, not only to develop capacity in the new technologies, but also orientated towards social aims, I would say, and addressing the issues of the new monopolies. In short, we propose smart complementarity together with smart specialization in order to make the whole Europe more than the sum of its parts. Okay. And I would add that this smart complementarity together with smart specialization should be based on a broader model of innovation than the one that has been used before, a model including social innovation and the foundational economy, an economy that meets social needs, as stressed by Goddard this morning, and also Kevin Morgan, who is also with us, has discussed and explained in different papers. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your clear exposition. If you have the slides, we will make them available in the website. And so now the next speaker is Marco Bellandi. Marco. Marco Bellandi, iPad di Marco.
Yeah.
Ci sei? Okay.
Yeah. Do you see my slides?
No, not yet.
Not yet. I try again.
Yes, do it.
I try again.
This is a suggestion for all speakers to try the sharing device before.
We can see you, Marco.
Okay. Do you see them?
We can see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
More. Yes.
Okay. You see the slides?
And the slides.
Okay, yeah. Fine. Thank you. Thank you, Ricardo and Enrico and Gioacchino for this very nice and important web conference. And I present here some notes on the impacts of COVID on local productive systems. And my presentation has two parts. In the first part, I go through some, let's say, a mildly pessimistic view on the possibility to combine the recovery from COVID and a path of progressive transformation featuring some levels of collective rationality. In the second part, I apply these remarks to our multi-scalar place-based view of territorial development, which have been nicely recalled and illustrated in many of the contributions this morning. So, starting with the first part, I consider first that a violent and prolonged shock may imply a catastrophic crisis for a socio-economic system with enduring impacts even after the end of the shock itself. But what nature will those impacts have in the medium and long term? This depends on many factors, of course. Let's suppose that the system will be able to survive thanks to a reaction of the actors of the system mobilizing the service of personal and collective capital, not depleted by the shock. Okay, is that possible that such reaction will address not only the recovery from the crisis, but also a progressive path transformation? Specifically, would the reaction possibly aim at correcting serious pre-existing deficiencies that the system was suffering even before the shock? Many could advocate such type of transformation as a desirable exercise of collective rationality, especially if the deficiencies have revealed themselves more clearly as crucial weaknesses during the crisis triggered by the shock. However, positive solutions are not so easy. Strategic barriers come from actors who, within the old order, enjoyed top rank positions that, even if possibly weakened, have not been removed by the shock and the crisis. And Sandrine just recalled the big global monopolies of our digital era. Furthermore, the many who hold small privileges may angrily oppose any change, being terrified by the widening uncertainty brought about by the shock, with its combination of social fragilities amplified under the crisis in waves of emotional-driven messages. Finally, solutions that feature ex-ante general collective rationality always include distributive options and alternative operative details. Choices easily imply conflicts in terms of either interest or cognitive approaches or both, even among the actors sharing a common aspiration to promote a progressive transformational path. For example, the transition to a higher green societal market sustainability often implies higher direct private costs for large parts of the business sector with respect to the simple restoration of traditional solutions. The higher cost could be considered investments if, after the transition, the higher sustainability brings also to a higher business efficiency, but uncertainty in returns increases with the need to coordinate private strategies and related public goods. The management of systemic uncertainty would require a state that supports strategic collaborative governance among various types of societal and business stakeholders open to a progressive path of transformation. Strategic collaborative governance provides coordination inputs in public goods for new solutions specific to complex socio-technical systems. But even when well conceived, the action of the state and of public and private leaders within progressive governance processes should win a political consensus within a fragmented, a difficult contested terrain against the representatives of constituencies enjoying reigns related to the old or also the new path, if the new path goes towards monopolistic solutions. So this is not so easy. In any case, nonetheless, I would assume, so I just mildly pessimistic, I would assume that ex-ante rationality has some windows of opportunity if progressive leaderships are able to keep contact with large constituencies aiming at the transition and interpret willingness to mobilize and participate to collective efforts for a better life. Coming back to the place-based view and local productive systems. And I would like just to suggest an application of the previous remarks to the perspective of local productive systems characterized by small and medium-sized enterprises, in particular in Italy, system coping with the crisis provoked by the COVID emergence and trying both to reposition for the post-emergence and to increase in particular, the readiness towards the impending digital transformation that Sandrina was talking about before. I focus on the impact of the period in particular, on what could be the impact of the periods of lockdown on the frame of opportunities and threats confronting SME productive systems as regards the wave of digital transformation. In particular, let's consider 4 possible sources. A, an enlarged experience, even if traumatic, of contact with a set of various digital technologies supporting distancing and work, study, or socialization at home, that families, small firms, local institutions have had in many areas. B, again for the same set of actors, a rapid accumulation of perceptions and feelings diverging from common sense diffused at least in Italy. In particular, the perception that the organization of production and social and health services in the territory of the community is a fundamental factor impacting on life. As well as the organization and the strategic power of the state as a fundamental role for the life of the community. Research and innovation structure, as well as educational institutions, we have discussed on this point also this morning, are a necessary ingredient of our contemporary life. And what about the feeling that the temporary clamping down of our model of mobility of related production processes has had a sensible positive impact on the local environment? C, the third sources, for many small and medium-sized enterprises in particular, we have seen serious difficulties in coping individually with the necessities of the emergency and in getting up for the restart of activities after the lockdown, being necessary not only the support of the state, but also of collective actions organized at the local level. And D, the fourth, again for many SMEs, the amplified difficulties related to the international fragmentation of production processes with the dependence on China for many supplies and from Europe for many direct and indirect destinations of products. Let's come to the last slide on scenarios. And the EU guidelines for the recovery, we have seen that if confirmed, they seem to recommend national planning of investments associating environmental sustainability, health security, social inclusion, and digital transformation. This could be a push towards an increased collective rationality. However, an effective and realistic translation meets the general difficulties recalled above, specifically the items A, B, C, D, recalled before, have to be considered carefully when advocating SME productive systems to exploit the new public resources towards a sustainable and inclusive digital transformation. Eventually, it would be necessary strong and open place leaderships that mobilize the new attitudes and feelings at the local level, craft institutional solutions appropriate to a new cycle of local investments, and activate multiscalar or include within multiscalar governance schemes at the European national level recovery plans for an open, inclusive, and sustainable development. Thanks, I have concluded. So I come back.
Okay, Marco. Thank you for your interesting and also theoretical presentation, interesting from a theoretical point of view. We have about 20 minutes for questions and discussion. And I think that the papers are very challenging, very interesting, so the discussion is worthwhile, and certainly we cannot exhaust the discussion in 20 minutes. I start with two questions. I believe that we should recognize that the future of the industrial policies is different since the COVID crisis and from what it was before. Although certainly the changes were already occurring, and in our group of growth, investments, and territory, we underlined very much the role of the demand side, while most of the industrial economists and also macro economists emphasize always the supply side. But I think this is especially important now because the COVID crisis has been determined by the collapse of the demand. First of all, the private demand. But then if we want to exit from the COVID crisis, we need to relaunch the public demand. And we know that there is, looking to what you just, Marco, said, approach the problem for rationality. There is not only rationality, there are also interest, private interest who are mobilizing the actors. No entrepreneur will ever do investment if there is not a demand, if he cannot sell the products. And also in the public sector, so, we know that there are bottlenecks which administrative constraints which we have to tackle. So the problem for us, regional and industrial economists, is to focus on more on the incentives, on the demand side, rather to focus always on the supply side. And the theories like also the smart specialization on the regional innovation or systems, they always focus on the supply side. They were, Enrico Cicciotti can elaborate more on this line, making the hypothesis that the demand was not a problem, because what we need is just competitiveness on the global market. But now export will not develop in the next 2 years, is clear. And also investment by the companies and investment by the states is in great doubt. So the relaunch of the economy will depend by consumption. But also in the consumption, there are this lockdown has determined a change in the behavior. People are not willing to spend. And the propensity to save has greatly increased, and we cannot see a great increase in the size of the current accounts of the banks. So there is a lot of liquidity, but there is not demand. So our proposal, even at the local level, and I think the new Green Deal is certainly a demand factor, because it's indicated that there are collective goods, common goods, which could relaunch the demand. But we have also to consider other type of common goods, not only environment, but also culture, health, and so on. And we should make a lever on that, because without this demand, there will not. So innovation is pulled by the demand and not only pushed by the technologies. And the other issue is that we as industrial and regional economists, we always focus on projects, on plans, programs, planning. But now industrial and regional policy should consider also the financial dimension and the fiscal dimension. Because in fact, national governments and the European institutions, they are not so much interested in the traditional planning approach, but they are focusing on this, we may say short term, but they are not short term. They are also structural reform in the finance and in a fiscal. So we should better integrate the planning approach with the fiscal and the finance approach. I think, for example, that a decrease of the value-added tax, temporary decrease and specialize on the tourism, service, education, or culture, could be a driver. We will not solve all the crises, but we need to give an incentive to spend. And it is important to not subsidize the hotels, but to bring back the customer to the hotel in order that the hotels will restructure and improve their hospitality. So fiscal measures are important. And financial, we always speak about local banks, but local banks are, first of all, both incorporated in larger banks who are not linked to the territory. And we have a case in Italy now between Intesa and UBI, but it's the same thing is occurring in Germany between with Commerzbank and so on. So we need to provide capital, risk capital, equity capital to the company, and especially to the small and medium-sized company, not loans. And we, in Europe, we are discussing between loans and grants. It's not the discussion. The discussion should be between capital, risk capital, And instead, we give loans also to Fiat Chrysler. We give loans to Louis Vuitton. We give loans to Air France, Lufthansa, and so on. Instead, we have to recapitalize the large company, and like Pilotti was saying, we need also a share, public share in those company, but also the small and medium-sized firms in Emilia-Romagna or in Lombardy or in this area, they need equity capital. And so we need to involve more private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, insurance, so that to provide long-term patient investment and not loans, because we cannot finance with loans the innovation. Innovation is too risky. So I call for a better integration between financial economics, public economics, and industrial economics. And I call for a better integration between demand side and the supply side, not only at the macroeconomic level, but also in our specific industrial and regional context.
Ricardo, may I add some?
Sure,
more?
sure,
Okay.
sure.
First of all, fortunately, you said already 90% that I want to say.
Because we discuss so often, Enrico, about.
So, so in this case, I saved the time. Only a few words that I want to add, not only for the contrast between supply side and demand side, but even for the contrast between export-led model and internal market model. Because all the industrial policy were based on approach based on export-led model. But we know that it is impossible to grow always exporting, not only because international demand is declining, but because what is sustainable for an export country is not sustainable for a country that's compelled to import, economically and socially. Remember, we know quite well, if there is an export from one side, there should be somebody else that is going to import. And this means an imbalance of the balance of payment. How can they pay imports? Or they export, or they have a debt, a very big debt. And this is what the crisis of many countries. So if we want to have at the global level a sustainable development model, we have to add to the export-led model even a model based on import. Otherwise, it means internal market, in other words. Try to imagine, you see, if you look at China, for instance, they start to grow, of course, pointing on the export-led model. Now, even China moved to internal markets. You could say, but fair enough, China is the biggest internal market of the world. This is true, but Europe has the richest internal market of the world. So we have to stress this point. This is a crucial point. It's unsustainable model of development based only on export, because somebody in some part of the world will have a lot of problems, and then we have to save him, or in some cases, not really to save him, but to buy him. It's enough.
Thank you. There are others who want to make questions to the speakers, and then I will give the opportunity to the speaker the word to reply. Other questions or comments on the papers? Joachino disappeared.
Yes, two words. It seems to me quite clear that the problem now in Europe is the lack of demand. And so public demand should be reinforced, and even giving more support to the private consumption. So I fully agree with the position of Riccardo in this moment, but even the position of Enrico Ciciotti. And for this, it is necessary a coherence between the supply side and the demand supply in Europe. So the attention to the needs of citizens should be the way on which we need to have an attention on the future transformation of the industrial structure at the European level, giving and maintaining autonomy to regions because they are different. So several papers discuss this point. It seems to me that these are crucial, and we need to balance these kind of problems together, creating a coherence at the European level, avoiding internal competitiveness, because the Lisboa crashed because it didn't exist a European competitiveness, but we realized an internal European competitiveness with trade surplus. This is the great problem at the European level, and this all the European citizens need to understand. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So the speaker can reply. I don't know. Sandrine, do you want to? Yeah, you have 2 minutes each, but we close at 12:30, but we may also use a little bit the break.
I fully agree with you that industrial policy has to become more demand-driven rather than supply-driven. And this is especially important at regional level. And I think that much discussion about smart specialization and critiques also that have been made to smart specialization also point to the need for a the new model of innovation that is broader than just science and technology. A new model aimed at satisfying social needs. So really turn towards the needs of the population, of the citizens. Okay, so this is really demand driven. And there has been different discussions about that. And as I mentioned in my presentation, basing smart specialization on this broader model of innovation allows it also to embrace the foundational economy, and so embrace also the objectives of not competitiveness, not growth, but health, education, all the social needs that are so important now after the COVID crisis. So there is certainly a possibility to make smart specialization more demand driven, and so probably more effective, together with this smart complementarity, because the comment by Enrico, I think, or Gioacchino talked about, and you also, about the silos, the European Commission with DGs that are very separated. Maybe smart complementarity might be also complementarity between policies and areas of policies that are represented in the European Commission.
Luciano, do you want to say something about a complementarity between industrial policy, fiscal policy, and financial consideration?
Just a small question for all about the emergent type of selection in economic system, European economic system or national economic system, and which type of selection we are seeing. Is a virtuous selection or a vicious selection? For example, I don't know, about the three level dimension of enterprise, internationalization of enterprise, and technological endowments of enterprise. Seem to me, this is a very important question to know what happened in not in next month, but in next 10 years or 20 years. And I think that the very support of state or relational state could be about that type of economic selection. What do you think about that?
Dimitri, do you want to speak about smart specialization?
Yeah, I think that the smart specialization, as we have presented it, is probably part of the solution. It's not a solution to everything, of course, but it provides another way of working. Don't forget that with the European Green Deal that it is on the table, and apparently it will stay with us for the next decade, we have a new directionality, which actually, I would say, to some extent, simplifies the choices that we have ahead of us, because it provides a huge range of criteria by which, for example, you can identify better and adjust the choices that have been made all over. As we speak, as you know, all European regions, there are more 120 strategies that are implemented, and many of them are on their way to be modernized and fine-tuned for the next programming period, which is around the corner. So apart from, I would say, the longer term, I think because we talk in a crisis context, and when you talk in a crisis context, you cannot forget the short term and the medium term. So there are issues that we can adjust by taking issue from the smart specialization choices that we have on the table. There are choices that can be fine-tuned and probably changed, because at the moment, as many speakers have stressed, especially small and medium-sized enterprises have been shaken because they have not been, they don't have the tools, and they don't know, they don't have the practice to navigate these new tools of avoiding the crisis. As we talk now via Zoom, a lot of people are obliged to work outside and to deliver goods and services, risking their lives. And this is something that we need always to take into account. So it's much more complicated than that. So in my view, we need to bring a lot of new kind of assistance to smaller enterprises, to communities and regions that need to see more clear, and to see how they can go out of the short term and the medium term, and then see, for example, if all these promises for a new role of the state could really hold. Because don't forget, to make a change, you need also the agents of change. And to be honest, I don't see many of these agents of change around. So I don't know if you have different views, but it's a little bit difficult for me to see how these changes will materialize.
Marco?
Yes, okay, just two remarks. First of all, I strongly agree with complementarity between different types of policies, between national, international policies and local policies, between supply and demand. Actually, as all of you knows, and Gioacchino, first of all, knows, good models, well-conceived models of local development have always had this type of contents, that is, this type of complementarity at the root of the interpretation of local development and what can be direct local development. But the difference now is that perhaps this type of view of the complementarity supporting paths of development is something which is not just restricted to industrial districts or like something like that, but it's something which is widespread at all the levels of our society. So this is an opportunity, but as I have tried to recall, there are many barriers. There are conflicts. There are rents, monopolistic positions. So it's not so easy to go through in this direction. And a second remark, coming to Enrico Cicciotti, the export-led economy. Yes, of course, we will come back to an export-led economy in a couple of years. But yes, we have 2 years in which the market relations will be quite clamped down. So there is a window of opportunity for pushing investments, private investments, toward thinking better to the possibility to create new markets like Riccardo recalled before, market for the life in the city, in cultural, economics, etc. There is an opportunity. Think about investing in new products, new services for new contexts of life. And this is a possibility. Okay.
Okay, we are on time. I would like to invite the participants who did not register on the Doodle. I cannot control whether everyone did register, to send me an email to my email address in order to maintain contacts in the future. We need to have your emails in order to inform you about the publication, the diffusion of this and the next meetings. So if you didn't give to us your email, please send it as soon as possible. And we have now a break, and we have the third session starting officially at 2, but everyone should log in a little before. So please register to this different ID, Zoom ID. And so I wish you
it's a good lunch.
a good lunch.
Are you going to offer a lunch, Riccardo? A virtual lunch, at least.
Virtual lunch.
Okay. See you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Good luck.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.